Welcome to another episode of Relentlessly Resilient, where real people share real-life experiences and the tools they've developed to move forward and live their best lives. I'm Jennie Taylor.
And I'm Michelle Scharf.
And today we are so grateful to have with us Tony and Amy Galvez. They are a wonderful couple that our paths crossed over a decade ago without even knowing it. They are a Gold Star couple here in the state of Utah, which Gold Star, of course, refers to the fact that they have lost a loved one in military service. And that loved one is their son, Adam, who was a Marine. And he lost his life in 2006 in Iraq. And we're a good almost decade and a half away from that. The story obviously doesn't start in 2006. It certainly doesn't end in 2006. But we're really looking forward to hearing from this wonderful family. We'd love if you'd introduce us to Adam, tell us a little about him, the background, and then kind of walk us through your journey, and let's just see where that goes.
Well, Adam was just an amazing young man. He had this smile that you could just reach to everybody. The girls loved him. He was the life of the party kind of guy. He could get into all kinds of trouble as a child and as a young adult, but he always found his way out of trouble. You know,
that's quite a skill to be able to get into it and back out of it.
We've come across many parents that have said, "Oh, my son was so wonderful, so perfect," and as wonderful and as big-hearted as Adam was, he sure had that side of him that.
Well, how great to acknowledge that he wasn't perfect, but he was a great person.
He had a typing personality and was really perfect for the military. So he enlisted when he was 19 and turned 21 in Iraq.
Okay. Had he always wanted to be in the Marines or military in general? Had that been like a childhood dream? Do you have a family background there?
We do have a few family members from the military, but it was something a little bit later in life that he decided to do.
It was his
Yes.
decision internal to him. Okay.
Yes.
Was the Marines was that like a big thing that he wanted to be a Marine?
He liked the color red.
Oh, well, there we go.
So,
there's always a reason, I found, with military men, like why they choose whatever branch they choose.
Yes, he really liked the color red, and that drew him to the Marines.
I love it.
And he also loved baseball to the point where he took his glove and ball to Iraq to play ball.
So he was ready to play.
He was ready
to
play. Yes.
Pack that up.
But he had gone in to the Army recruiting office, and they were busy at the moment, so he went next door to the Marines and realized that he was more suited to be a Marine.
Wow. Those Army recruiters are ruining the day they missed out on him. It was definitely the Army's loss, and wonderful that he could join the Marines, but that's a great story. They just didn't have time for it that day. Well, glad the Marines opened their doors. So tell us, he enlisted, he's 19, obviously he's going to do some basic training and things. What kind of job did he have in the military? And then he ends up deployed.
He was, by nature, some people are naturally born to do certain things. And in his case, he was born to be a mechanic. He talked me into buying a junker car from the junkyard. So that, because he really liked this particular car, and he said, "I can fix this, Dad." And I'm going, "It's in the junkyard for a reason." And he talked me into buying it. We bought it. I towed it home, and I bought him a book on maintenance on how to fix it and everything like that. Sure enough, he got the car running.
Are you kidding?
He tore that thing apart. He flipped through the book. Said, "Oh, that's pretty cool," and threw it aside and went back to work.
And then just started getting to work. Like you said, it was intuitive to him.
It was intuitive.
That's
to
the
him.
kind of guy I need fixing my car next time it breaks down. Not the guy that's got book smarts. I want the guy who knows how to fix it.
He was just could fix cars, and so he scored really high on his testing scores, and they had him become a mechanic. He was an LAV mechanic. That's the school he went to in Aberdeen. LAV kind of looks like a tank, but it has wheels.
Okay.
In the Army, they call them strikers.
Okay.
So that's what he did.
So that's what he's working on.
He's working on that. And we were so grateful because when he got assigned to go to Iraq and he deployed, he was way off in the Syrian-Jordanian border.
Oh, really?
Far away from all the action. which drove him nuts.
It made Mom and Dad very happy.
Made Mom and Dad very happy.
He probably didn't join the Marines to try to stay on the sidelines.
Safe
That's
side.
not really the Marine mentality.
It is not.
And I can appreciate that. My husband was the same way. The last place he wanted to be was somewhere on the outside looking in. He joined with the intent of wanting to serve and be there. So tell us a little about Iraq.
So another LAV mechanic, line mechanic, so he wasn't at the maintenance station, but he was out on the front lines. He got hit by an RPG, or an RPG hit the vehicle that he was next to, and he was injured severely, Kenny Lyon. And they asked the LAV mechanics back at Camp Korean Village, is where he was stationed at, who wants to go to the front lines. And, of course, Adam instantly puts his hand up and says, I'll go. You know, totally ignoring my advice to him is don't volunteer for anything.
Just stay back, son.
And they told him, Galvez, put your hand down. You were already going. We just wanted to see if he'd volunteer.
Oh, they just knew.
Yeah.
They knew that would be him.
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
and so he just went. So, and he arrived, and he called us and told us that he was leaving for the front lines. And, of course, Amy and I are just, okay, be safe. Keep your head down.
Yeah, be careful. Be
careful,
careful, son.
please. Be careful. You know, come home. And he says, okay. And so he calls us and says, I arrived. Oh, cool. So how was the front lines?
Yeah, was it everything you've dreamed of to be out there?
He goes, kinda. And I go, what do you mean? And he goes, within 15 minutes we were in a 2-hour firefight.
Oh, wow.
And I said, no way. He goes, yep. Adam, what'd you do? He goes, I'm being a Marine. I'm with my men. Yeah. Okay. And we heard story after story afterward from his Marines how they loved him because his natural-born ability to keep their units running. He was the mechanic in charge of all of the LAVs, and to a man, including the commanders of the unit, they never had a breakdown.
Really?
Because he was
He
always...
was so good at keeping things up.
Yes. And they would just say, oh, I have this knock, or I have this tick, or I have... And he'd go fix it. He'd spend the whole night fixing it if he had to, but they never had a breakdown.
Wow.
So the Army had a big push back in 2006 in July to go back into Baghdad. And the Marines had to take over some of their checkpoints.
Okay.
And they took over a checkpoint, and their barracks was located in the middle of the checkpoint, and they were unhappy with that location. So they were in the process of negotiating a alternate location for their barracks. That night, within the first week that they were there, a suicide bomber comes in and detonates a fuel-laden truck with explosives and blows up the barracks that they were in. Adam woke up. He was buried alive underneath the sand and dirt that the building was composed of, and couldn't move, and realized that he had a large beam on top of him and that he was injured. And then he heard gunfire. And so then he heard somebody yell for help. So he dug himself out from underneath the gunfire, underneath the sand and the debris. He runs through the gunfire because the only place that he knew there was a shovel was on his LAV. He knew there was a shovel there. So he looks for his weapon. His weapon's destroyed. So he just hunkers down, runs through the gunfire, accurate small arms fire, grabs a shovel, runs back through the same gunfire again, and he told me that he could hear the bullets pinging on the ground all around him, and starts to dig out his buddies, because there's 4 other people, 2 outside,
Buried in that rubble.
and there's 4 other people buried in the rubble.
And the firefight's still going on.
The firefight's still going on.
Oh, my goodness.
He said he could hear the 50 cal from the tower open up, and the rapid response team was on their way in, and they made short work of the attack. 4 people were killed that night. His sergeant, which he dug out of the ground, died in his arms. One of the other guys that survived said he knew he was going to be okay because he could hear Adam. The helicopters that came in to retrieve the bodies and the wounded, he had to be ordered onto the helicopter because he didn't want to leave the survivors.
He was still trying to find them.
Yeah.
And help them. Wow.
One of the really touching moments, touching things that came out of that is he was with his sergeant when he died. He was there holding him, holding his hand when he died, as he had been frantically trying to dig him out. And later, when we met Sergeant Williams' family, you know, we were able to tell them, as difficult as that was, Adam was there with him.
He didn't die alone.
When their son died.
So he was ordered to go to be medevaced out because he was injured. He hurt his leg when one of the beams fell on him.
Oh, I'm sure. I can't imagine the weight of that collapsing.
And so he was in the hospital, which in and of itself was a blessing to us, because one of the privileges that he was granted was unlimited phone time on satellite. So we were able to talk to him
So he's
daily.
in the hospital telling you all of this.
Yes.
You're getting first-hand account of exactly what happened.
That's right. So we ended up, Adam called us, and initially, you know, he's just been through this horrible experience. He's injured himself, not severely, but he is injured. But his buddies around him have died, and he survived. So initially, he's dealing with survivor's guilt. Why did I survive?
And grief.
And he's
Yes.
just lost his friends.
Yes.
Yeah.
Tremendous grief. And the thing about Adam, going back to his younger days, we always knew there was something special about him. We have 3 children, but Adam was a little different. And we always knew that someday he'd do something very special. And as he started talking about, why am I alive? We said, remember your special purpose. God has a special purpose for your life. And as far as we're concerned, he's dodged the bullet. So obviously, God has a big plan for Adam's life. Mm-hmm. Little did we know, 3 weeks later, we'd have something completely, he would be killed. But during those 2 to 3 weeks, he was at Camp El Assad. We talked every single day on the phone for hours. We talked about everything. And there are probably few parents who could say what we can say, and that is that nothing was left unsaid.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's really, we don't always get that, right?
We don't. And I am so thankful that the Lord gave us that time. There's so much that happened during those 2 to 3 weeks that godly people just put in his path where they could have these conversations where we just knew God was working in his life. It was, I mean, truly, as a parent, I am so very thankful that we had that time. And really those assurances, because, you know, Adam knows the Lord. He knew the Lord. But yet this was a time where he could truly reflect and draw close. You know, none of us realizing that the moment he'd be stepping into eternity was just a few short weeks away.
How intriguing that you had the time to prepare almost without knowing what it was you were preparing for. That's a powerful thought that, you know, like, for example, Michelle, her husband passed away from cancer. She was actually preparing for him to die. And yet in your story, you're preparing or given a chance to prepare for this unknown that turns out to have been this great tender mercy in your life. With that, we're going to pause for a minute and take a break. And then we're going to come back and get into the story of You're going to tell us what happened that 3 weeks later, and then the 3 weeks after that, and the 3 weeks after that, and one step at a time after that. We'll be right back. All right, we are back, and we're here talking with Tony and Amy Galvez, and we're speaking of their son, who was a Marine serving in 2006 in Iraq. He had this horrific experience where there was an explosion. He saved several people. He's unfortunately seen several of his close Marine friends killed. And then you've got this 3-week period where you're able to speak with him, and you look back now and realize it's a preparatory period, not knowing what you're being prepared for. So let's talk a little bit about that 3 weeks, and then, of course, the news you get at the end of that 3 weeks.
So Adam is in the hospital, and of course they cut off all his clothes because she's been injured, and they have to examine him, and it was his leg that was injured. And so he has a friend that happened to come by and goes, "Hey, Adam, is that you?" And he goes, "Yeah, Kevin." He says, "Can you get me some clothes and some food? I'm starving." So Kevin was able to get him some clothes and some food, and because he was sitting in the little hooch that they had provided for him in the PJs that they had given him, and he wanted to get back in uniform.
Come on, can I just put my clothes back on?
Yeah, exactly.
Little dignity for a man.
So being a Marine, Marines, as all military do, they love their unit. They love their men that they're assigned to. And during that period of time, he was promoted to corporal. And he was talking to, who is now a full-bird colonel, at the time was the chief executive officer at the time. And they sat and they talked. He's a godly man. And him and Adam he still talks about how they spent hours sitting on the steps, him in his pajamas, just talking about things, life in general, the Marines, anything and everything. And he kind of took my place, that a father would be there to talk to his son about. And I'm so grateful for that. But Adam goes, I think I should have been promoted by now. And he goes, "What makes you think that?" He goes, "Well, I've met all the criteria." So he immediately went and checked into it, and sure enough, he was due to be promoted. So they promoted him to corporal, and he managed to talk his way out of the hospital to go to the memorial service, because they had asked him, they said, "Look, your unit's due to step down next month in August, the end of August, first part of September. So we can just send you home now." And he called us and said, "Hey, they want to send me home." And I said, "If you're asking your mom and me if you want to come home, absolutely, come home.
We are ready for you, boy.
We're ready, absolutely." However, Adam, you're a Marine, you're a man, you have people that are under you. Whatever decision you make, your mother and I will stand behind you 100% in whatever that decision is. If you want to come home, if you're asking us, yes, come home. But if that's not your decision, we will stand behind whatever decision you make. So he calls us back the next day and said, "I'm going to stay with my guys. I'm going to stay here. I'm getting better. I'm good to go. I'm going to stay." And then he talked his way out of the hospital, and they said, "Well, if you come back, we'll let you go to the memorial service for the 4 that was killed." And he goes, "Okay." And when he got to the memorial service and it was over and done with, he conveniently forgot to go back to the hospital.
He just checked himself out and said, "I'm good to go."
I'm good to go. So, and he kept trying to get on his LAV because he's the driver mechanic. And his commander said, "You can't get on the LAV till you can get your shoe on." He got his boot, can't get his boot on. His leg is still swollen. He said, "When you get your boot on, then you can get on the LAV." And we have stories of him running after the LAV with one boot in his hand, trying to sneak onto the LAV behind him, behind the commander's back, but they won't slow down for him. And so he tried. Finally, he was able to get his boot on, and the next day he was supposed to go out. Well, at a Marine Corps birthday ball, I had told Amy on numerous occasions, I said, Adam really saved someone directly. He saved somebody's life because somebody was covering for him. We'll never know who that is, but he was covering for somebody, and they didn't have to be in that position. when the bomb hit. And I really wonder who that is. Well, at one of the Marine Corps balls, I noticed this young Marine. He comes up and he turns around and walks away. He comes up to our table and turns around and walks away. Finally, about the third time, I said, come here. Come talk to us. You can talk to us. Whatever you have to say. If it's a story about Adam, we want to hear it. We love
So this
stories.
is at a Marine Corps ball after you've lost Adam.
After we've lost Adam.
And you can tell this young Marine has something to say.
But we don't know what it is. Yeah. And he comes up and he just starts bawling, crying and trying to get out of him. What's wrong? We think, he's really upset that Adam died and whatever. He was the Marine the night before that he had told Adam, he says, look, I'll cover for you tomorrow. He goes, no, I can get my boot on. Those are my men. I can go out. I can be in that LAV. And he goes, not really. It's no big deal. I'll cover for you. He goes, no, I've got it. I'm good. And so he said, okay. And so Adam went in the LAV that day on the 20th of August. They were out and they went over a pressure plate. And the pressure plate, which was activated by a 9-volt battery, geared for heavy vehicles. So if a car ran over it, it would not have exploded. But because it was geared, it was electronically censored for a heavy vehicle. The 40-ton LAV, when it went over, triggered the 120-millimeter artillery rounds and one 130-millimeter artillery rounds that detonated and blew the LAV up into the air. 40-ton vehicle blew it up into the air and put it back down in the hole that it created, killing Adam, killing the gunner, and killing the corpsman. Now, the gunner was killed immediately, and I don't want to go into the graphic details of that. Sure. The corpsman, unfortunately, he couldn't get out of the vehicle as it erupted into fire. The driver was able to evacuate himself because the driver's compartment is separated by a wall. The vehicle commander, the explosion knocked him forward out of the hatch, but his boots caught on the hatch and pulled him back into the flames. The other Marine that was in there was in the scout sniper position, and Adam was in a scout sniper position. They were both able to open the doors, pull the fire suppression, and step out of the vehicle. And Adam died just outside the vehicle. The other Marine made it a few steps further, and he was burned over 69% of his body.
Oh, my goodness.
And he is still a Marine today, motivating people.
He's amazing.
I can only imagine what
amazing.
he's been through. So tell me, how many were killed then in that explosion,
3.
including Adam? 3 were killed. Wow. So you get a notification. Obviously, this time it's not Adam calling you to tell you of these heroics and the event that happened, and he's not medevaced. But tell us, if you're willing, tell us a little about that.
Before you start on that, could you just clarify? Was it concussion? Like trauma and just the pressure that he died from? Because you say
the blast came
the
through
explosion
through the LAV right in front of him, right in front of the scout compartment, is where the rocket came through.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Think of
But he was able to actually step out and pull fire suppression.
Yeah, so later we found out that he wasn't killed instantly from that blast. That was our assumption. A little bit later we found out that he lived another minute or so and was
horrific.
able to get out, but the vehicle was engulfed in flames. So it was, even the things we found out later were difficult to
process.
To process, to take in, but yet we wanted to know. We wanted to know the details because that's our son's story.
Right.
As bad as it was, that's his story, and we wanted to know those details. But it was a Sunday afternoon. Tony was working that day, and President Bush was coming to town in the next week for a VFW convention. And it was a time here in Salt Lake where when Rocky Anderson was the mayor, there was a lot of anti-war rhetoric coming from the mayor's office, the city, and it was just a time where I just felt like I had to stand up.
And you did. You took action.
You did.
Took action. Tell us about that, because it's very impressive.
So what I did was I started emailing different places, different groups, saying it's time for us to stand up and do something to support our military. And
just to point out, this is before your son is killed.
Before,
This
yes.
is that same time, that same summer of 2006.
Right.
But this isn't reactionary, like,
no,
my son
this
just
is
got
prior.
killed. This
So
is leading up to.
I had spent the whole day sending out emails. Come on, let's get together. Let's show a good presence. When the president comes, that we're supporting the president, we're supporting the military. And I had even, I'd written to newspapers and just other groups. Well, while I'm still at the computer typing out all these emails, I hear a car door out front. And so I look through the blinds, and 2 Marines are crossing the street and walking towards our house. So immediately I knew what it was. And immediately I remember thinking, what about his special purpose? It's happened. What about his special purpose? You know, God, you were going to do something here, but
his life was spared because he clearly had big
Right.
things to do. Right, I can see
Exactly.
that.
You know, so I ran to the door, and you know, they came in and started, you know, just as kind as they could be. I said, just tell me, just tell me.
Skip all the protocol already.
So we were notified that he had been killed. There weren't a lot of details at the time. And I had just talked to him the day before. We'd spent a good half hour on the phone, 24 hours before. And shock, I think, kind of takes over. I felt like I was being very strong. And I think I was. I think God gave me that strength to get through those moments. And if you want to talk about something just a little humorous or that doesn't make a lot of sense, shortly after, my dad came over, and he didn't normally just pop in without calling first. So he comes into the house just as the Marines are leaving. And he said, you know, what was that? What was that about? And I told him, I said, they said Adam died. Would you like some coffee? And I went and made a pot of coffee.
Okay, that's incredible right there to see how your mind and your body went into shock, went into just kind of routine survival, that you didn't just collapse on the floor. Nope. And here you're here, Dad, yes, please come be the guest at my home. I can't even imagine that.
But meanwhile, Tony's
I'm hearing you tell the story. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you, but I'm hearing the story, and I'm thinking she's going to now tell us that she started crying or screaming or, you know, because I'm envisioning I would have started screaming when I saw the 2 men walking towards my door. I would have opened the door and started screaming, no, 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 no. In total refusal.
Look what the human mind, for one, you know, you said God gives you this power. Look what humanity is capable of, the fact that we don't completely collapse. And yet look what a twilight zone you enter. Yeah. So let's talk about that in a minute when we come back from this next break. What now? After you've gotten the notification, let's walk through that, and then what is it that's carried you through these now 14 years of doing wonderful things, of influencing, of carrying on, of motivating and inspiring people like the rest of us? How did you get from that knock on the door to where you are today? We'll be right back.
And we're back with Amy and Tony Galvez. Amy's just told us that she is been informed that her son's been killed, and her father stops by and she's making a pot of coffee. And and she's a bit in shock, but Dad still doesn't know yet. So, Tony, do you want to pick up and tell us, or are we going to, Amy, you're going to lead us in on that?
Well, the Marines that came to our house, Captain Portis, we will always be grateful for Captain Portis. This touched his heart deeply. Our casualty assistance calls officer, and this deeply touches him, and it's important to him to do this job right, and let me tell you, he did. And he is someone else that we thank God for putting in our lives, because he made a huge difference for us and actually became a lifeline for us for quite a while. But Captain Portis said, we're going to go park down the street. Tony's going to be home in a few minutes. We don't want him to see our car when he pulls up. So as soon as he comes home, he says, call me, and we'll come over and talk with him. So Tony comes home, and my dad and I tell him what happened, and then Captain Portis comes back to the house to talk with Tony.
Yeah, the typical have a seat. So I sat down and I go, no, I am not taking this sitting down. I'm going to stand up and you're going to tell me like a man what's going on. I already knew. And I said, and so he notified me. He said, that your son had been killed in action. And I asked for some details, which he did not have. And I said, there can't be a mistake, right? There's no way you made a mistake here. And he said, no, I'm afraid not. This is because that's the first thing. It can't be real.
Yeah. Right. Surely it's some other Marine, some other body, some other dog tag.
Yeah, this is impossible to be real. And he stayed with us. As Amy said, that he was a lifeline to us, and he stayed with us for quite a while. And we thought that was it, but he would come back every day. The next morning, he was there waiting for us to wake up, and he'd stay with us, and he'd talk to us, and he just became part of the family every day. He walked us through, and when it came to processing stuff and doing things, he says, this is a decision that you have to make, or I can make this decision for you. What casket, what headstone, all these things that you don't think about.
And you don't want to.
Never thought about.
Where do you want to bury your son?
Right.
Never
Who
thought
wants
about
to answer that question?
Exactly. And, what is the casket going to be made of? Things like this. You're talking about your son, your boy. You don't want to think about things like that. But he was a stern rock for us. And God was there for us. And sometimes when I didn't have anything left to give to Amy, and Amy didn't have anything left to give to me, God was there for us. And so it was an important aspect to this, whole trauma.
Yeah. What happens next?
After Tony came home and I told him what happened, the Marines came and talked to him. And then you have a few minutes to really, only a short time to start really digesting what has happened. Then it's time to let the rest of the family know. Our son Travis was actually downstairs in his bedroom while all this had happened and didn't know what was going on.
How old was he at the time?
16.
So he's a teenager.
Yes.
So they hide out. For anyone who doesn't have a teenager, they hide out for a while.
18. He was 18 at the time.
Oh, okay. Still right?
Yes.
They're still teenagers. They hide out in the room. They don't actually come out often.
Yes.
Only to eat.
Yes. Ravage the refrigerator.
Yeah.
Anyway, so he just stayed quietly in his room, processing that. And then we had to tell our daughter, Sarah. So Sarah was 24, and she was out with some friends. And so I made a phone call to her, and told her what had happened, and of course then she came right over. But and we also had 3 little grandchildren at the time, Sarah's children. So Sarah became a rock and took care of a lot of things for us and managed a lot of the service, the funeral and setting up the service. We called our family, and Adam's friend, Bobby Clark, a Marine, wasn't with Adam, but he was home at the time. He had been deployed but was home at the time. And we called Bobby, and then he went ahead and told the friends, the local friends. But during this time, the kids are going through their grief, we're going through our grief, and we each, fortunately and thankfully, had good support from our church, from friends.
Tell us about the journey that began. That's day one now. Day one, the captain's there. You're going through the next few days kind of in a trance, picking caskets, planning services. It's your private funeral, but it's also a military member, so it's kind of a loss for the entire community and becomes public. And then what did you find that helped you? You've got this great person. You say God's putting things in your lives. What are some of these tools and opportunities that you've either had or created that have helped carry you through these past years?
Through the initial first few days, you can't sleep. You really can't sleep. I remember being so hungry, but I couldn't eat. I couldn't get food to go down. You're just in this emotional state where, you still think this can't be. It just has to be a bad dream, and I'm going to wake up. But as we start moving forward, as Tony just said, it's really hard when you're both going through the same grief to have a lot to give to each other. And what happened was that God started putting people in our lives where people that we didn't know before, but they had maybe a connection to the Marine Corps or friends, long-lost friends, that just stepped into that role to be that support that we needed. And it became so important, and it was obviously the hand of God. And what we could see was, even though we prayed for Adam's safety and fully believed he would return home safe and sound, and we knew he had a special purpose, even though it didn't turn out the way we expected, God still was working. Way before this happened, he was putting people into place that would play a role later on. So when Adam was in Iraq, we started sending care packages and
not just to Adam.
Not just to Adam. So we started just sending
a package or two.
Yeah.
We started sending to Adam.
And then Adam said, "Hey, we got a Marine here whose family has disowned him. He doesn't even get mail. You think you could send a care package to him?"
Right.
Sure. Give us a name. Next thing we know, we're into the hundreds.
So we did. We started sending care packages very frequently. We started sending cooling ties because it's so hot in Iraq. It was summertime. And also Psalm 91 bandanas. I don't know if you've ever seen those, but they're camouflage bandanas with Psalm 91 written on them. Just real comforting. And, we'd pray over those and send them out. And then pretty soon we got, other Marine moms and families involved. And then it got bigger. And then we got our church, Calvary Chapel, involved. And pretty soon it was an ongoing event. So there was lots of interest. And what we found was that people were really they were very supportive of the military and what was going on.
They just
didn't know how to express that support. So we gave them a way to show their support. And what we found was that really the care packages were as important to the people that were donating and putting them together as they were to the people who were receiving them.
They become that beautiful bridge
Right.
between the civilian and the military.
Yes.
That is wonderful.
And actually, through the care packages, there was a connection made with, at the time, Captain Chad Hubbard, who is in Iraq, that actually he now is just part of our family. But he didn't know us, he didn't know Adam, but through the care packages, our lives connected. And he became one of those very strong support people for us. You just know God just put that person in place. So here we are down the road, and Captain Hubbard finds out that Adam's been killed, and he just stepped right up and became that pillar of support for us. And there were many other people that you just know it's God that put them in place to support us.
We had a year later, a Boy Scout comes up to us and says, I want to do an Eagle project. I would like to name a street after Adam. If they can name streets after basketball players, we can name a street after a hero. And one of the comments that was made by our mayor at the time, Rocky Anderson, was if we name them after one fallen soldier, we'll have to name the whole city after fallen soldiers. And that's not a bad idea. But that Boy Scout for his Eagle project got 300 South between Redwood Road and I-15 renamed Adam Galvez Street.
And that was Junior Cruz, was the Boy Scout.
And while they were doing that, the Marines came up for the ceremony, the renaming ceremony, and there was this big pomp and circumstance and everything like that. And a bunch of Marines came up, about 80 of them came up. And we got to experience somewhat that homecoming that we never got.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When the Marines get off the bus, we never got that because Adam got off a plane in a casket.
That's not how he came home.
Right.
So we got to see the Marines come home, or basically to us. But I was standing there at that street naming, and I was looking at all these Marines, and I knew that the next month they were going back into harm's way. And one of the Marines' dad, who was killed, Randy Newman, with Adam, I'm sitting there going, thinking, who's going to do this for his son? This was a Boy Scout who did an Eagle project. Who's going to do this for his son? And so somebody's got to do something. And I'm going, well, whenever that's somebody, that's me. I'm the somebody. So I said, okay, and now I've identified who needs to be the somebody. That's me. Now I need to identify what do I need to do for these Marines. And so the idea comes to mind. We do all kinds of things for Gold Star parents. And it's only been a year, and we're getting all kinds of accolades. Adam has gotten all kinds of accolades and the appreciation for what he's done and the sacrifice he's made. And don't get me wrong, every last one of those things well-deserved that he got. But he doesn't know it. Well, he does know it, but he's not here to receive those accolades. Why can't we do something for at the time, Marines, for the military that is here so that they can accept these things and say, hey, thank you. More than when we walk up to say, hey, thank you for your service, and turn around and walk away. Something tangible. So that started a 7-year project. 7 years I was working on this memorial down in Sandy City Hall is where it ended up. It's this huge monument down there at Sandy City Hall, and it's for those that have served in the past, those that are serving right now, and those that are going to serve. There is an aspect to it for the fallen, and there's an aspect for the missing. And actually, the aspect for the missing in action gone but not forgotten, it's a bronze statue of a lady that is holding her hand up against a granite, and there's a ghost image of another guy, of a soldier, not a Marine, a soldier, touching her hand. And it just says gone but not forgotten. And my intent at the time was that he was deployed. He's gone, being deployed. And it took on a life of its own and became the missing in action part of it, where people more identified more in missing in action. And so that took on its own life. And then I created a couple of unique, the Gold Star banner, okay, is a blue star banner, red border, white center, with a blue star for every serviceman that's serving. So 2 people serving, 2 blue stars. If someone is killed, you place a gold star on top of the blue star, and thus the Gold Star banner. Well, I said, well, let's make this a little more consistent, and we made a red star and a white star. Red for wounded, injured, red for the blood, and white for missing. So if you go to the monument, you'll see the 4 flags there. 2 of them are unofficial, 2 are official. But so we found ways to serve our community, to become incorporated into the community and touch those that are still alive, and they can still appreciate and not have to go through the terrible, terrible heartbreak that we went through.
Yeah. That is such a heartbreaking story, but also really beautiful. I mean, it is sad that through his loss, so much good has come from it, but what a great tribute to a son that was clearly well loved by his parents and served his country so well.
And something that really touches us is that the impact Adam has had on some of his local friends. We know people that he grew up with that there was one gal that had struggled with addiction, and I ran into her one day and she says, you know, I have thought about what Adam did with his life and what I'm doing with mine. And I'm going to make a change. I'm not doing this anymore.
That's awesome.
She got off the drugs.
Yeah, that's awesome.
You know, and we've just heard different stories from people where Adam's story made a difference for them, or, you know, they've gotten closer to God, you know. So it's been really touching to see that he's had impact even after his death in the lives of many people.
I'm thinking of what you said, where he had this special mission, and that mission didn't get buried with Adam that day. And the way you've carried on after his loss is just very inspiring.
We had another incident, and just to repeat what she said, we had a gentleman, young man, who grew up with Adam, who was in prison, and the counselor that was doing life lessons with the prisoners gave an assignment.
He was in prison in
Washington
state.
In another state, Washington State. Gave an assignment: write something about somebody that impacted your life. So he wrote about Adam. And he was reading this, no names, nobody knows anybody. He's reading this, and the instructor stops him and says, "Are you talking about Adam Galvez?" And he goes, "Yeah, how did you know that?" He says, "Because my nephew, Randy Newman, was killed with him."
Oh, wow.
And she was the counselor.
She was the
leading
counselor.
group.
What a connection.
Oh, that's
So
crazy.
Things like that across the country, even across the globe. We've gotten letters from people that have said, Adam's story has made a difference in our lives. His special purpose continued on way past.
Well, I cannot thank you enough for joining us today and sharing so much of your heart, of your lives. And I'll add to that special purpose Adam had, this special purpose you two have. And what it means to me as another Gold Star family member, newer in this journey than you are. I'm younger in my experience with this, but what a great light you carry and bring, that beautiful monument. If you're listening and you're anywhere near Sandy, Utah, you have to go see it. It is powerful, it is touching, it is inspiring. But thank you for taking your grief and finding ways to serve others, to lift others, to remember and to honor others, and not just honor those who die for us, but those who are willing every day to serve us and would die for us if they were asked to. So thank you, Tony. Thank you, Amy, for coming. Michelle, I know my heart is full from everything that we've shared today, and just so grateful that you would take the time and share such a piece of your hearts with us.
Absolutely. You know, it's so awesome to see a couple who's lost so much Losing a child is never easy, and then in the service of our country, while it's honorable, it's still painful. But clearly, this young man was raised with a heart of service, and that has continued on through his family, and it's a beautiful thing to see. We are going to close out our podcast today. We want you to subscribe for free to the podcast, and if you like what you have heard, please give us a rating and a review. If you know somebody who has a real story about real life and you're willing to share, send us an email at rrpodcast@ksl.com. You can also find us on Facebook at Relentlessly Resilient. Remember, whatever you do today, remember to be kind. You have no idea the struggles other people are dealing with in their lives.